Hello and welcome to With Winning in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Troy Bassham, along with Lanny Bassham, the founder and a legend of mental management systems. We're going to be talking about why the champions dominate and everyone else are struggling. And so basically it comes down to three things, in my opinion. We're going to talk about this using some things that I talk about in the book Attainment. I'm going to dive into that, get Lanny's opinion, my opinion. The basic thing is that the elite people are winning because of three main things. One, they prepare right. Two, not only do they prepare right, they train right. So you got to prepare. You got to have a schedule, a plan. You got to implement the plan. And then when you get into competition, you have to focus on the right thing in competition. And we're going to talk about those three things in detail. So when I look at Attainment, I was wanting to write a book that complements With Winning in Mind. Been around a lot of elite athletes during your era, so growing up around those elite athletes, you kind of pick up on some things. So I wrote some things down here that were in the book that I thought would be interesting as far as what make the elite elite. As you would say, 5%ers. 95% of winning is done by 5%. Those are elite. So I wrote down in the order that I think they should be in as far as execution. Would be one is elite performers manage their time and they stick to a schedule. And so why don't we start with that one and then we'll transition into the other two. But I think we live in a world today where people kind of just go with the flow. They don't plan in advance. And I remember growing up that when you ran the International Shooting School, you had weekly training plans for people. It was like, okay, and what I was doing wasn't matching up to maybe what somebody else at the school was doing then that week. You had specific reasons and guidelines, but let's talk about what's the importance of one, having a schedule that manages your time and why it's important to stick with it. Why not just change it up? What would be the reason why we want to stick with something instead of just kind of changing it when we live in a world that's always ebbs and flows and changes? So I'll ask you right quick and then we'll have a discussion on that. Why is it important to have a weekly training plan, especially in individualized sports?
Well, we tend to deal with sports that are proactive elements in the sport that have repetition. In other words, you throw a pitch, you kick a penalty kick in soccer, or you hit a golf ball. It's repetitive. Well, if you're trying to get better at a repetitive element, there are things that you can do consistently to make that happen. And there are principles, training principles that we've discovered that improve the probability that you can become consistent quicker if you follow a training plan that has certain elements in it. And so we called that process Training to Win, and we have developed products around this, and it started. I think it was so important that you included it as one of your 12 elements that separate winners from other people. For me, it's kind of I learned about the importance of a schedule when I went in the Army at the Army Marksmanship Unit, because things were pretty well planned out for us in terms of preparation for tournaments. Although I saw a difference between the kind of shooter that was at the marksmanship unit, which we already came in at a relatively high level. All of us had been collegiate All-Americans, or we had shown our level of expertise. When I started the International Shooting School, I thought, well, most of the guys that are coming into the program are not at that level yet, and could we produce a training schedule that is based on the marksmanship unit? Like, for example, we always had a record day on Friday, which is the same thing that happened. I learned the importance of that, and but also the importance of having some individual training People needed certain things that they needed to do that maybe other people didn't need to do, and that's the reason why I came up with the red, white, and blue team. It's the people that came in were in kind of a dependent stage program where I pretty much told them whatever they needed to do, and then when they reached a certain level of expertise, then they advanced into the next stage where I was pretty much an interdependent coaching process where I was asking them to develop some of their training themselves, but to teach self-reliance. And then I had some world-class shooters that were there that were kind of in the independent stage where they were kind of running their own program, and I was more of a consultant than anything else. So it's a combination between a training plan that is designed for you and you follow it, and maybe later on as you progress, maybe something that's customized specifically for you.
Yeah, there's two big reasons why I think it's important to have a training plan of some sort. The weekly training plan is easy because it's week by week. So the first thing is you have to schedule your time off. What days off are you taking? And you want to strategically put that in a specific order. We always recommend that if you're going to train 4 days a week, it's better to do 4 days in a row, 3 days off, as opposed to spreading that out. A lot of athletes that we work with, they want to do like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. They like to spread out during the week. But there's a huge advantage of, if you can, within your weekly schedule, of doing 4 days in a row, 3 days off. And the two primary reasons why that is if you do really good the first day, I have an opportunity to build on it the second day because it's fresh in my mind. I know I'm doing well, and it improves the probability you have a great week. But what if I don't train well that first day? Well, I probably know exactly what I can correct. I can then work on that correction so by the end of the week, I improve the probability of having a good week of training. If I have gaps in the training, it's hard to do that. So that's one thing when you're scheduling your training week is make sure you organize your days off where it's beneficial to you building confidence or being able to build and work on things that you need to correct. A lot of people I'm just going to spread it out so I feel like I'm getting appropriate training when you're better off just doing, a run of it and then time off, come back. The reason why this works is, as you have stated many times, the self-image tends to forget the bad habits before the good habits. So therefore, you're able to come back, pick up where you left off, even though there's been 2 or 3 days off. You're not going to forget how to compete in your sport, training sport. The second reason why it's important to have a training plan to stick with it is because if you go to a competition and you don't do well, first thing we're going to ask is why. What do I have to change for the next event? I don't want to repeat the same training process, expect a better result next time. If I keep doing that over and over, then I'm going down the road of insanity. Where if I have a training plan and I don't do well in competition, I can look back and say, okay, did I follow the training plan? Did the training plan work? If it didn't, I at least have something I can go by and alter it appropriately. Maybe I need more lessons with my coach. Maybe I need to spend more time in conditioning training. Maybe I need to spend more time in simulation training. But it allows us to have a format to go by. And I think those are the two big things about having a training plan. This is why team sports, I think, are much easier. Because you leave it up to the coach, to develop the training plan, which, fair or unfair, they're the ones that are going to get the heat if the plan doesn't work because they're the ones, doing the plan. I like John Wooden's approach to preparation. He goes, look, when we go into a competition, he never talked about winning to his players. He says, my job is to implement a game plan, put a schedule, train the team. They go, they compete. Your job is to implement the plan. If you implement and we don't win, that means I have to make adjustments. I miss something. But if you don't, then that means the training plan could have been correct, but you need to implement it. So it took pressure off of people trying to win, and it put them to where they're executing and running more of a process element. So I think having a training plan takes pressure off when you're in competition. That would be a third benefit, if you will, from that. But I see a lot of individuals work with a lot of golfers, a lot of archers and shooters, and very few of them have training plans. Even the adults. I'm not just talking about the high school athletes. I'm talking about everybody. They don't have a structured training plan, and I think they're missing out on the reasons we talked about.
Well, we talk about the advantage of having a coach develop your training plan, and what happens when you don't have a coach anymore, or you're in a sport that's not a team sport, that you don't have a coach that's designated to develop a training plan for the team. So you have to develop your own training plan. And I think some people just skip that process, and that's a big mistake. And what you really need to do is find one that works and try to repeat that one. I honestly believe that one of the advantages to that you just brought up of Coach Wooden's process of training the process instead of thinking about winning, taking the pressure off of winning. We do exactly the same thing when we teach our process to our students. We basically say that what you're training for is you have a process, that system that you run, and your job is to implement that system in a tournament. And when you do implement that system correctly, you tend to score higher, which as a result of running the process, you win more. But if thinking about winning causes you to overtry, so we get the same benefit of Wooden's philosophy in an individual sport by running a system.
Yeah, and if you don't have this, it's going to be very hard to do step 2 in this order. I have a training plan, so to speak. I know what I'm supposed to do this week. Okay, then I get to implement it. Well, when implementing it, it goes in the second part, which elite performers, they train with purpose, and others practice what they enjoy. So here's where I got that from. So and this might not be true in all sports, but I do know in our sport, international rifle shooting, this is very common, and I know it's common in golf. It's where I'm going to go to the range, and I'm going to do a practice match every day, and I'm going to call that training. Well, what purpose is that? What am I working on? How am I building skills and drills? I'm not really following up that. There's not really a plan. It's just when I go to the range, I'm going to just shoot what we call a course of fire. Similar to in golf, a lot of people will go, they'll hit a few bars, warm up, and then they go play a round of golf. And if you're trained to win, that type of training is not going to work for you. The elite levels athletes, they train with purpose, meaning there's an organized way that they're implementing what they're doing. So when they set up their training plan, they're going to have days during the week of, okay, this day I'm doing that record day. I'm going to perform like I'm in a competition. So if I'm a golfer, I'm going to play around a golf, simulating it's a turnaround. Meaning, if my tee time's at 10 o'clock, I'm going to show up at 9 o'clock because that's what I normally do in a tournament. I'm going to warm up just like I would in a tournament. I'm going to play that following the same rules I would in a tournament. End of the day, I'm going to count that, add it up, score it just like it was a tournament. I'm going to treat it just like a tournament day, simulate it. Just like at the Army Marksmanship Unit, typically every Friday we had, quote, a practice match. Well, we had to show up. Hey, we're starting at 8 o'clock. Well, you better get there at 7, so you can warm up the same way, treat it the same way, because your name was going to go up on the wall, and you didn't want your name to be the last one on the board. You wanted your name to be on the top of the board. So you took it seriously, and it was supposed to simulate, because if you don't have simulation in your training, then how are you able to compare what you do in a competition with training? It's kind of like, okay, I have this, but then there's got to be some stuff that you're working with, skills and drills. So I need to have the skills and drills training in that week. So how many days do I need? What do I need to do? Well, if you don't have what we talked about first, if we don't have a training plan, then I don't know. But if I do have a training plan, I know exactly what to implement. The key difference is that as I'm implementing it, I want to make sure that I'm training with a purpose. Am I getting better, not just skill-wise, but am I building confidence at the same time I'm working on skill? That's training with purpose. Is I'm going to work on these three things. I start with the first thing I'm working on. Things aren't going well. I stop after a few minutes and say, okay, I'll come back to that later today. I move on to the next step. And then I move into the third step. And then I come back to step one later on. And people say, why would you do that? Well, because if it's not going well, I'm getting negative imprints into self-image. Why not stop, change up the practice? And this is a common thing we did in 3 position. Typically we start with prone because it's the easiest position we shoot. But if it wasn't going right, I wouldn't just sit there and shoot my 30, 45 minutes of prone. I'd stop, go to standing or kneeling, come back at the end of prone. 9 times out of 10, prone was better. I don't know why, but it was. So that's what we're talking about, training with purpose. You want to make sure that you're training in a way that's preparing you to go win and perform well in competition. If I don't have a purpose, what's the point of executing it? So another way of looking at it is I see this a lot with high school, college athletes, because I work with a lot of those individuals. And the advantage they have in that environment is a huge disadvantage. The advantage they have is they have other teammates that can motivate them, they can push each other, they can work together to build each other up. The disadvantage is they can be a major distraction. So, hey, Lanny, let's go out on the course and play a round of golf today. Me and Jimmy are going. You want to join us? Now, your plan is to work on these 3 areas that you want to work on, but you're only on the first one. What do you think most golfers are going to want to do?
Yeah.
They're going to stop what they're doing. They're going to go with me and Jimmy, and we're going to go play a round of golf because that's what's fun. So people tend to do what's fun rather than what they really need to work on. Not saying you can't have fun in training, but that goes against the sticking with the plan. So am I sticking with the plan, and am I training with purpose? Am I really implementing every training day with purpose? What am I going to do today? What's the order of it? Okay, got it written down. Are you going to follow it? And is there a purpose to it? If there's not, then how are you going to beat the guy who has equal skill that's doing those 2 things?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking about the difference between training with purpose and recreational play. I think a lot of people go out to golf course and they basically do the kind of things that a recreational golfer would do, but they're trying to train to do better in a tournament. I mean, if you are at that participation level where you have graduated from training to learn a sport to what we call training to compete, when you made that decision, you have to transition to a more strict, objective-oriented training plan. What does that mean? That means you have an objective that you're going to work on when you go out to train today. You're not going to work on what's necessarily fun. You're not going out there to just have fun. You're going out there to improve a skill area. So you have an objective. Most people don't have a journal that has an objective level that we have in our journal where you write down, oh, here's what I'm going to work on today. Secondly, in order to have a training plan that's effective, you need to have a way to measure improvement. In other words, you need to have a way to say, I don't know, I've got a bucket of balls out there, and I'm trying to hit a ball into this bucket, and today I go out and I hit, 4 out of 10, and then the next day I hit 5 out of 10. Well, I've got a way to show improvement, or putting a ball or anything like that. Somehow or another, you have to have a way to show improvement, so that you can be encouraged by that skill area, And the third thing that I thought about is that the importance of a record day is when you go out and do a record day, don't mix it up with your buddies playing around a golf. It would be better for you to have other people that are also training to compete to play with. Like I understand that most of my tournament guys, the tour players that I work with, they don't when they play around a golf, they're playing around with other tour players. They're not playing around with their buddies at your church buddies or whatever it is that they have. They're seriously doing that, what we call record day, with other people that are serious, because there's a lot of distraction when you try to mix training for a tournament with recreational shooters or recreational golfers.
Yeah, and if you do that well, then I think it helps segue into the third point, which is one of the things that we're doing is we're also training for this one, and that is elite performers focus on what they should do, others focus on what they did. In competition, as you're competing, you're going to have times where you're performing great. You're going to have times where you didn't perform great, and then it kind of averages all out, and here's what you've got at the end. Your result is whatever it is. What's interesting is that performers tend to react to what happens to them when things don't go their way. So I'll give you an example. Talking with the up-and-coming top-level shotgun shooter. Skills off the charts. So you currently work with the world champion Halise shooter, who's is he out of high school yet? He's a young guy.
Yeah, he's just out of high school.
So he's a young guy. He's about 18, 19 years of age. And the kid's been dominant for about 2 or 3 years. He's been coming up and up and up. And now, he's one of the best Halise shooters in the world.
He actually won the world championships when he was still in high school.
So still in high school. So one of his competitors who I work with, who's a couple years behind him in age, but from a skill set has the skill set, but when it comes to what's different in what he's doing versus what other people are doing, because it motivated him. If he can win, and he's only 2 years older than me, then imagine what I can do in a year or two if I can follow some of the key principles. Well, one of the things is that he probably doesn't react to a bad performance. If I don't perform well, I'm not getting angry or upset at myself. I'm focused on what should I do about it moving on. As this individual was focusing on what they did, and it wasn't positive. They were getting upset. They were getting angry. They would say a few choice words to themselves. They wouldn't get mad and show it externally. I'm sure there might have been a facial expression that mom and dad would have picked up on. But, or in shooting, especially shotgun sports, if someone's not happy, you usually know it, but the way they eject the shells. Especially if they're over and under, they take the shells out and they slam them into the bucket. It's like, okay, that's not pro. Well, what are they thinking in their mind? They're not thinking about what they should do. They're thinking about what they did. And elite performers don't do that. Elite performers focus on what they should do. So there's a clip. The NFL has this mic'd up series where they mic up a player. And it's kind of fun and comical to see what they're talking about. And usually a lot of times they mic up the quarterback. That makes sense. He's probably doing most of the talking anyway in communication with everybody, so it makes sense to do that. But I remember in the Super Bowl where Tom Brady was trying to bring his team back against Atlanta and beat the Falcons. They were behind, and he walks on the sidelines, and you could see the offensive linemen, their head were down. They're kind of looking at the scoreboard, and they were just kind of, I'm like, what's going on? They're focusing on what happened. He sits there and goes, hey, follow the game plan, man. Follow the game plan. Trust the process. He's reminding them, this is what we should do. We get the ball back. We're going to follow this process. We're going to trust it's going to work. We're going to do that. When he missed a pass, he goes over to the wide receiver, and he says, hey, next time the ball will be there. Like, he didn't go and tell the guy he ran the wrong route. He didn't go there and say he messed up. He said, hey, the next time the ball will be there. So what's the guy focusing on? He's focusing on what they should do from a process standpoint rather than what they did. So we look at it, we refer to it as reloading. When I execute a task, I want you to think about it in a productive manner. That's the whole purpose. If I'm beating myself up, that's not productive. But if I'm focusing on, okay, what should I do? And so a simple example would be if a golfer misses the green, and it's not that complicated of shot. Let's say they have a pitching wedge. Most good golfers are going to eat up a green if they got a pitching wedge coming into the green. The question is, okay, what should you do? Like next time, if I gave you a ball and say, okay, Lanny, why don't you go ahead and give it a shot? What would you do? But you have to tell me what you're going to do. Are you going to be able to articulate what you did, or are you going to tell me what you should have done? If you're going to tell me what you should have done in a productive, process-oriented way, that's a huge difference in imprinting than if I just say, well, I don't want to do this. And the good players don't focus on what they did. They focus on what they should do. Huge difference in competition and how it affects their performance, but in a team environment, how it affects their teammates' performance. What do you have to add to that?
I don't have anything to add to that. You covered everything. You said everything that I was going to say. So I would just concur with what you're doing. I mean, you're the expert, and you wrote the book, and I think that you covered that well. I was just thinking when you were talking that. Well, I hope he's going to talk about reload, because that's one of the most important things. That I saw the difference between thinking about what you did wrong right after a shot, then correcting the top performers that I know, the ones that win 95% of the time. They tend to look at a bad shot or a bad ball hit into the trees or something like that as, well, what am I going to do with this one? What am I going to do, not what I did, which illustrates exactly what you're thinking and what you're teaching. And I got to admit that, when I read your book, I kept thinking about the difference between the way I made every mistake in that book at some point in my career until I learned that was a mistake, and I started thinking the other way. And one of the most important ones was to understand that every time you hit a bad shot or shoot a bad shot, like in rifle shooting, it's a lesson. It's what's this teaching me? What is the solution to this, instead of focusing on the problem? And I remember my father telling me that when I shot a bad shot, he didn't emphasize what I did wrong. He says everything that you do in life has a certain optimal way to do it, and anytime you deviate from that, you want to think about, well, how do I get closer to that one optimum way to do something? So I was always taught by him to think about the solution, and that was a big advantage early on. Sometimes I forgot about that and paid a price.
Well, it's easy to focus on what you didn't get, because if you're very competitive, you want to win. You want to be successful. And when you're not successful, it's so easy to fall into the trap. If you want to know more about how to respond, not reacting, more information is in the book Attainment. But these are 3 things that elite performers are doing on a consistent basis, and why they're doing most of the winning, and the other 95% of the competitors are struggling to catch up with them. If you follow these 3 things, you're going to improve and you're going to get better. If you like this information, please give us a thumbs up. It does help the channel. Also, if you haven't subscribed to it, subscribe to it, and we'll bring more content to you in the future. So until next time, take care.